Mickey 17, based on the novel Mickey 7, which I read the first 4 chapters of, is about an expendable who goes on a dangerous journey to colonize an ice planet, which sort of reminded me of Hoth. Hey there guys, let's talk about Mickey 17, and I whipped out the Pizza Planet jacket today because if I could colonize any planet, it would be Pizza Planet. This was one of my more anticipated movies of the year, and I was mildly upset when they originally delayed the release until April, and then I was pleasantly surprised when they moved it up to March. Not only is the concept interesting to me, you have this dark, dystopian, sci-fi film with Robert Pattinson in it, and it's directed by Bong Joon-ho, who directed one of my favorite movies of 2019. Actually, it is my favorite movie of 2019, Parasite. Now, when it comes to the comedy vibe of this movie, it is pure satire set in the futuristic time period of 2050-something. It definitely feels like the movie Idiocracy from 2006, a dystopia where everyone is slightly incompetent. The first half of Mickey 17 is solid. The pacing was good, the backstory expanded well, and visually it looks stunning. When you're watching Mickey 17 up on the big screen, it definitely looks like director Bong Joon-ho utilized all that $100+ million budget on those visuals. It looks awesome at times, and how often do we get a high concept, high budgeted, dark comedy movie? Not very often. And speaking of the visuals, let's talk about some of the gore throughout this movie. And if gore is your thing, well, my first question to you is, what happened in your childhood that caused such trauma? But nevertheless, I like to see bloody things happening up on the big screen, especially in the way that this movie handles it with that dark comedy vibe. For example, early on in this movie, there's one scene where Mickey's working on the outside of this spacecraft, and it doesn't turn out very well. But that's his job. He has to do it because he is essentially a guinea pig who works for this dubious corporation who uses people. Hence why he is an expendable. So if you die, they just reprint your ass and you go back to work the next day. It reminds me of a company I once worked for called Pizza Hut. And while we're still on the topic of gore, there's one sequence later on in this film where they show you the process of printing someone, essentially cloning them. And I don't know if I was grossed out by it or quite enjoyed the process of watching it. It just... Now let's talk about the title character himself, Mickey 17, played by Robert Pattinson. He is by far the best thing about this entire movie. And since this movie is a dark comedy, satire, political, sci-fi action film that has a moral dilemma built into it, there's a lot of things happening. But when it comes to Robert Pattinson in this comedy movie, he's funny. And the best way I can describe Robert Pattinson's comedic style is it reminds me of Ryan Gosling. They both share this subtle, nuanced comedy style where they never become too over the top or zany or wacky like cartoon characters. They seem like likable, grounded people that just have mannerisms about them that make them funny in certain situations. And speaking of Robert Pattinson, let's get the obligatory spiel out of the way. If you're like me, you probably grew up despising Robert Pattinson because of those awful Twilight movies, and as a guy who worked in the movie theater during the duration of the majority of the releases of the Twilight movies, you learned to hate these movies and everyone who watched them. But after watching movies like Good Time, directed by the Safdie brothers, it completely changed my perspective. And the last thing I want to say about Robert Pattinson's performance in Mickey 17 is he starts off as a down-on-his-luck dude who more or less sells his soul to the devil for an occupation. But really, the best way to describe his character is he sort of reminded me of Forrest Gump. He's mildly incompetent. He's not quite all there. He doesn't have a lot of forethought, but he definitely has a heart of gold and a likability about him. We'll go with that. And one of my favorite concepts about Mickey 17 is when the movie finally touches on the moral ethics of cloning people. What makes a person? Is it the soul? Is it the body? Or is it a combination of both of those things? And you have to ask yourself, is the original option always the best option? Or sometimes, is there an alternative option that can still get the job done? Speaking of that, it's time for the sponsor of the video. Oh hey, I didn't see you back there. We all have wants, needs, and desires. It's human nature. So why not take the red pill and see just how deep the rabbit hole goes at Tantally.com. With a massive selection to fill any void, or any void to fill any selection, there's something for everyone, and that might just include one lucky someone watching right now. Oh, you know who you are. And also, they lead the industry with products that are soft, but much more realistic, which will give you that real-life immersive experience that you can revisit
again and again and again.
And it's all delivered to your door with discreet packaging. My nosy neighbors are none the wiser. Use promo code FlickPick for 12% off at checkout. Click the link to Tantally.com down below. But like I said originally, I quite enjoyed the first half of this movie. I thought the pacing was good, I was into the concept, I was along for the journey, and then the second half of the movie happens. And that's where the political satire kicks in really hard, and 47 other ideas come about. Mark Ruffalo in this film plays the political, flamboyant, sleazy bad guy who is this dictator-ish leader on this expedition who has no real expertise whatsoever. He's essentially a big dumbass. He's completely insufferable and incompetent, and you just hate him. But it gets to the point where his interpretation of this character, it's a bit on the nose at times, and it feels like a mix between this dude from Galaxy Quest yeah, mix that with a weird interpretation of Donald Trump, and that is essentially Mark Ruffalo's character in the movie Mickey 17. And that's where this movie has become divisive on the internet. That is what the debate is over. It's not about the other performances, the concept, the story, the direction. Nah. We're just simply talking about Mark Ruffalo's SNL parody version of Donald Trump as inspiration for his character in this movie. And I don't mind political satire in a film, but at some point it almost becomes distracting and the joke gets a little bit stale by the second half of the movie. So yeah, when it comes to the character Kenneth Marshall played by Mark Ruffalo, for the first half of the movie, I thought it worked because less is more. By the second half, every scene that he's in, it feels like he's sucking the energy out of the movie and overshadowing the other performances in the film, but in a bad way that cheapens it. And speaking of antagonists throughout this film, his character's wife is played by Toni Collette, and she's very self-absorbed and narcissistic as much as he is. And her character is obsessed with sauces, like sauces that you put on a food, like Chick-fil-A sauce. But then again, if I could take a bath in Chick-fil-A sauce, I probably would. So yeah, that's the running gag with her character throughout the film. Every 25 minutes, she rambles on about sauces and wants people to drink her sauce. And there's a deeper metaphor there, I'm sure, with some symbolism, how sauces have no nutritional value in them, but I don't know. Like I was saying, throughout the second half of Mickey 17, this movie tries to inject a lot of ideas, a lot of different concepts. There's a love triangle, there's an alien creature subplot that goes off the rails ever so slightly that I almost feel like took me right out of the movie, and there's a multitude of other things happening along the way. But none of the ideas really get enough time to grow and expand to the point where you can really care about them. It's like they threw a lot of things at the wall, but not much of it stuck. And throughout the chaos of all these various subplots, the movie does lose its direction, and I thought to myself, I just wanted to go back to that awesome concept of cloning people. Expand on that more, please. The runtime of this movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes long. And when it comes to a comedy movie, even though there's a lot of action and space sci-fi sequences happening and some great performances by Robert Pattinson, at a certain point, comedy movies can overstay their welcome. And I really feel like this movie could have been tightened up a little bit to cut the runtime down and maybe keep some of the energy alive. Now, here are my final flicking thoughts on Mickey 17. I didn't hate this movie, but I wanted to like it way more than I did. When it comes to Mickey 17, I'm split right down the middle. I thought the first half was great, and I was along for the ride, and I was interested where they were going with the story, and I thought some of the characters were really interesting before they got a bit exhausting to watch. And then the second half of the movie sort of undoes a lot of those great things that the first half built up. It's really such a mixed bag of a movie, so I'm going to give Mickey 17 this right here. Now, with all that said, I would still recommend watching this movie, maybe not at the theater, but at home on a rainy day with some frozen pizza for the first half of the movie and Robert Pattinson's performance alone. And plus, the entire concept of cloning people and using them as guinea pigs is sort of intriguing and fun to watch at times. Those are my thoughts on Mickey 17. Now here's my question for you, and let me know down below if you've seen the movie, what did you think about it? Or what is your moral and ethical stance on cloning someone? And my question to you is, would you clone yourself? Really think about that for 1 second. I don't think I would do it because I have a very punchable face and I would just beat the shit out of myself. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. That way I can see you next time.